Dilip Kumar, Part 7. As the war situation worsened, some inevitable changes occurred. The office bearers of the club changed, and the contractor Taj Muhammad Khan was replaced by someone whom the new executive committee chose. The manager too did not wish to continue, and he advised me to move on. By the time I had earned a bundle of currency notes, which I counted for the first time, I had a good 5,000 rupees, which was a great deal of money those days. I thought it was time to return to Bombay and seek a job that Aghaji would approve of or assist him in the running of the fruit business. I was now a far more confident and free spirited young man than I was earlier, and I wondered how I would explain my going away to Agaji. I was certain that he would be unforgiving till Amma pacified him in her own gentle way. In fact, had I not gone away in a huff over the trivial incident and Agaji's rage over it, the whole situation would have returned to normal the next day itself, with Amma's winsome, persuasive abilities coming to the fore in blowing the crisis over. It was sheer destiny that I did not give her or myself a chance to normalize the situation. I was now happy that I had ventured out on my own and gained some valuable experience, but as I had tasted a little bit of freedom, I was unsure whether I would be able to continue to submit to Agaji's will and do everything as he wished. I returned to Bombay a few days before Eid. My elder brother, Ayub Sahab, knew the date of my arrival, but he kept it a secret to give a surprise to Amma. My younger brother Nasir and my sisters were also aware that the prodigal was coming home, but they too remained tight lipped. My youngest sister was still a child and knew nothing more than to cry for her feeds when she was hungry. When I climbed the stairs to our house on the fourth floor, I could hear my heartbeats loud and clear. The familiar sounds of the street, the nosy neighbors staring as they always did, and the screeching horns of the few cars that plied on the street and begged cool, indifferent pedestrians to move out of the way were all so welcoming and lovely for once. I realized how much I had missed all these sights and sounds while I was away in a city where I imagined I was reveling in my anonymity, whereas in reality I was subconsciously pining for the warm, indescribable security of my family and familiar surroundings. When I entered the house, my younger sisters first saw me and they ran to give Amma the news. She came out hurriedly and I stood transfixed where I was, unable to take a step forward because I was trembling with relief and happiness. In the next instant, while I embraced Amma, who was talking inaudibly in the din my sisters and brothers were making, I heard footsteps near the door, which I feared were Agaji's. It turned out to be Chacha Umar, who had heard from the men on the first floor about my reappearance and had come up to verify. To put it briefly, the reunion was of the nature one saw in the good family films we used to make at one time, except that nobody knew who was saying what to whom and why somebody was laughing and why somebody was clamoring to be heard. Amma's sobs turned to gentle laughter, and then her habitual concern surfaced as she asked me if I was on fast. I was not, I told her. There was no way I could observe the fast in the club where the discipline and abstinence expected of one during the holy month of Ramjan were hard to observe, thanks to the irregular hours of work. I soon found myself sitting with Amma in her room after all the months of separation from her. It took me some moments to believe that I was actually back home and sitting by Amma's side on her nice big bed. She was looking pale and tired, her lace bordered dupatta covering her jet black hair combed back neatly. I remembered that it was the same dupatta that was covering her head on the day that I had set out for Pune. I had got her the lace from a place close to Crawford Market from where English and Parsi ladies bought borders and laces to add elegance to their attire. Amma was least bothered about the glamour of her dress, but my aunts were extremely choosy and they always picked on me to go to the cloth stores and get them yards and yards of silk and cotton for their attire. They liked my selections, but they always complained that I brought the best colors for Amma and not for them. The fact was that I always chose colors that suited Amma's complexion, and despite her indifference to what she wore, she always looked elegant and beautiful. As I sat by her side, I thought it was the right time to take out the money I had earned and give her a surprise. I opened my bag and took out the neat packet containing all the money I had earned, and I placed it in her soft hands while she looked at me curiously. I waited anxiously for her to express her happiness as she untied the packet carefully. She looked at the bundle of currency notes and looked up at me with worry and fear writ large on her face. What is this? Where did you get it from? She asked, her low voice betraying her anxiety. I was hardly prepared for this reaction. I told her it was the money I had earned by dint of hard work and enterprise. She stared hard at me and, without saying a word, she went up to the mantel shelf where the Holy Quran was kept and beckoned to me. She asked me to swear on the Quran that it was money earned honorably by me. Smarting inside and trying hard not to let my heart show, I put my hand on the holy book and took a solemn oath. I could see that she was satisfied. Agaji came home as usual in the evening, in time to break the Ramzan fast with the family. I was in my room by then, bathed and wearing my crisp white trousers and shirt, ready for the repast my mother had prepared. I could hear her telling Agaji that I was back, and I heard him say he knew about it. It was typical of Agaji to pretend to be unemotional and detached. His warmth and concern surfaced only once when Amma had a serious attack of asthma and she was choking and gasping for breath. He began yelling for someone to rush and fetch the doctor who lived across the street. His face was then a picture of helpless alarm, and I still can recall the tall, strapping figure bending to hold my frail Amma in his arms. If you can recall the famous scene in Mashal, I must tell you that while going through my rehearsals, I drew my emotions for the rendering of the scene shot over 4 nights in a row from the memory of that episode and the agony of Agaji in his urgency to get instant medical help. Mashal movie released in 1984. The scene depicts me on a rainy night desperately seeking help to take my seriously ill wife, played by Wahida Rahman, to hospital by trying to stop any vehicle that comes along, but in vain. Agaji and I met cordially as if nothing had changed. It was a relief to me, to say the least. In less than a week after Eid, which we celebrated with the usual camaraderie by inviting our friends from other communities to share a festive meal with us, Agaji was talking to me about an apple orchard in Nainital that was on sale. He wanted me to go there and see if I could negotiate and close the deal for a certain figure. It was a welcome situation for me because this was the first time my father was talking business with me. Though he and I never exchanged a word about the Pune episode, it was obvious from the way he engaged me in the conversation about finding new avenues for procuring fruits for the business that he now felt I had a yen for business. He also discussed an idea he had for canning peaches and exporting them. Indeed, I was personally convinced after my success with the sandwich stall that I could do business and earn handsome profits. As I listened to my father's idea of buying an orchard in Nainital that was apparently going for a song, I was also toying with the idea of taking up a completely new line of business, feather pillows. I had made contact with a man who was ready to make me a partner and give me a substantial commission for selling such pillows to the gentry. I accepted his offer and deposited the earnest money. After losing some money, I found out soon enough that the business of selling pillows was not up my alley and thought it was a better idea to go to Nainital and do as my father wanted me to. I went there and met the owner of the orchard, a kind man who respected Agaji and was keen to sell his land and trees to us. I could see that more than half of the orchard had been destroyed by locusts, and what remained was hardly worth buying. I told him we would have to negotiate the price. He said, "Of course, I understand." I had no idea what price to quote, and sensing my inexperience in the business, he told me, "Son, I will take a rupee from you as token and we will close the deal. After you go back, Khan Sahab can offer me whatever he deems good for the property." I returned home with the rupee and told Agaji about the property. He was very pleased. He was now getting the feeling that I was a good businessman and asked me to keep the accounts and maintain registers and do all that he thought I was capable of doing. He was happy that one of his sons had the acumen to carry on the fruit trade. However, something inside me was giving me the feeling that it was all very well to take over the mantle from Muhammad Sarwar Khan, the successful fruit merchant, and carry on the family trade, but this was not what I was made for. Thank you very much.